The Rise, Fall, and Destruction of Superman Solar, a film that literally fell from the skies and became one of the worst fan films of all time after being thought of as one of the best to ever be conceived. But let's talk about how it got here. Back in 2022, an announcement got made for Superman Solar. This, like Spider-Man Lotus, was a fan film that was announced with an Indiegogo campaign attached. When it was announced, it had a few very awesome stills, shots, and graphics, and gave people a great reason to donate to this film. Eventually, a ton of people donated to it, eventually leading to its $20,000 budget, way more than many other fan films to ever be created. $21,000 for a budget is more than almost any fan film that has ever been made. This fan film blew up. Many people in the fan film community saw this original announcement and began to talk about it. It became a huge debate between whether Spider-Man Lotus or Superman Solar would be better. At this point, neither controversy had struck yet, and both fan films were beloved and had everyone talking about them. These two fan films were on the level of Jason Todd and a lot of the other huge budget fan films that were in production at that same time. And at the end of the day, everyone was so excited to see what this fan film would do. With $21,000 in the campaign eventually closing, everyone was very curious to see what this character study of Superman would be. Many people were excited about this fan film for many different reasons, and especially people who were already fans of A-list productions. Unlike Spider-Man Lotus, A-list productions had already produced many films. People who saw their channel knew what to expect and were very excited to see what they could produce. With the director and writer also being someone who fought in wars and stuff and was a huge American, they were very excited to make this film, and so were many others to see it. They had very good promotion for it and had a lot of updates to the Indiegogo campaign. But eventually, all went silent for a very long time, and on their channel was just the very simple announcement for the film. As many people as were excited for it, a lot of people were very worried to see where it would go next. People wanted to see what would come in next and see how it would get better, but also people were worried because they didn't even know if it was going to release. Around this time also, the controversy of Spider-Man Lotus hit. This was when Spider-Man Lotus really fell. At this point, Superman Solar was still standing tall, and this is why many people at this time started to say, we need more Superman Solar, I'm excited for Superman Solar, and this is when it really blew up. Eventually, all went silent about it, and even though a few knew about it, many people didn't think about it. It was kind of a background thought. And for people who were very excited about it, on every Spider-Man Lotus trailer, or the final trailer, or anything, it will be still more excited for Superman Solar and stuff. And everyone wanted to see what it would do. Eventually, an official trailer dropped, and this is when everything got crazy. Though the official trailer was not much more explosive as the announcement, and less people were talking about it than for when the announcement dropped, many people were very excited to see what Superman Solar would do. The trailer provided a lot of different interesting clips, a few dialogue sequences, some interesting shots, and all the stuff in between. People were very excited to see what Superman Solar would be, because even though people knew it was going to be a character study, and from the scenes they saw in the trailer, no one really knew exactly what would happen in it. And this official trailer really blew up. So many people were watching the trailer, and so many people were excited to see what would actually happen in the film. Many top, not just fan film creators, but YouTubers were talking about this fan film, and were as excited about it as the people were for Spider-Man Lotus. Spider-Man Lotus really blew up and took over the world in not just the fan film community, but in the Marvel community as well. And though Superman Solar was not nearly as big, simply as showing how it had 1/5 of the budget, it still really did blow up. A lot of people were talking about Superman Solar in the fan film community. Eventually, it kind of became unclear if it would release or when it would release, even though we had a pretty good idea of the summer of 2023. Eventually, they finally announced that it would be releasing on July 24th, around there, give or take, 2023. This fan film then got everyone very excited. People were talking about it, and at this time also Spider-Man Lotus got released, or not released, but got the announcement released for it to come out on August 13th, August 10th, 11th, whenever. It got delayed 8 times. So no matter when, if it was August 10th, 11th, or 12th, 13th, whenever for Spider-Man Lotus, or whenever Superman Solar released in July, everyone was excited to see if these fan films would be good. Collectively, these fan films made about $140,000, which is a ton. And these were also some of the most hyped up fan films in 2022. And though that may not seem like an infinite, crazy amount of time, everyone was still extremely curious to see if these fan films would be any good. And though there were a ton of people still saying this fan film would be great, everyone was hating on Lotus and hyping up Superman Solar. Everyone thought it would be pretty good until it released. And then that is when Superman Solar fell. Though, unlike Spider-Man Lotus, this fan film did not have much of a journey. Spider-Man Lotus went from being this massive figurehead of the fan film community to very much going on this huge journey and then eventually dropping to being the worst fan film to some of all time. This fan film fell when it released. And not just that, but it got destroyed. Immediately, people started making reviews on it, not because it was good or not, but because of how terrible this fan film was. This fan film did very few things right. This fan film did not have a very good cast, it did not have very good things in general, and just had a very boring story. So before talking about exactly what happened to this fan film, let's discuss what my thoughts are on it. Well, in my opinion, this fan film is one of the worst fan films I've ever seen. Direction-wise, there are a ton of mistakes. The green screen isn't always fully blurred out, which is weird because they have an incredible Superman suit but can't key out a green screen. They do some very interesting things with the shots, some things that shouldn't be done, and some very interesting cuts thrown throughout. As much as I wish I could say that this fan film was incredible, it really wasn't. Even though Spider-Man Lotus wasn't great, it had some good moments. This film did not. Editing-wise, there were very little, I don't think there were any good edited scenes. There was one fight scene which could have been interesting, and it had some interesting parts to it. However, it still didn't look very good, and it still was a pretty weak scene overall. Though I wish I could say it was a very good scene, a very strong scene, I just can't say that very much. Because the fight scene with Brainiac just wasn't very good in any way, shape, or form. Moving on to acting, Clark Kent may have been one of the worst actors I've ever seen in a fan film. The actor who plays Clark Kent was very bland with her lines and didn't give you any reason to care about them as a character. And even though it could have been this incredible character study of this person, you had no reason to care about them. Clark Kent has a line where he tells a person to kill themselves if they want to. That is not Superman. Superman should be inspiring anyone to live their fullest lives and do whatever they want to and keep living. That is Superman. Superman will save a life whatever it takes. They will never let someone die. That was probably the most memed line from this entire film. How could you ever make a film and then be like, I think Superman will let someone kill themselves? I don't think that would ever happen. I genuinely don't. And I don't know why this fan film put that in there. That's such an odd thing to put in your fan film. Let's have Superman encourage death. And not just that, but Clark Kent is very stiff with a lot of their dialogue. Not just are they kind of stiff and there's a lot of weird things, but some of the lines are just very weird. During the scene on the couch when he's like, let's become our quirky self, when he's looking at the paper, he doesn't become quirky, he becomes annoying. He's like, maybe it's on page 5, maybe page 6. I assume that this Clark thought he was being cute and stuff, but it was kind of just annoying. And it didn't make him funny or lovable. Because I think this film really tried to make Clark Kent this lovable guy. And they try to make him this, like, nervous self. But they make him not just, like, too nervous almost, but they don't make him have any confidence. And yes, Superman doesn't always have that much confidence, but it's to a point where it's so annoying. And it would be cute if the character acts it so it's like a bumbling idiot and it's funny. But it's not funny, it's just pure annoying. And not just that, but there are just some parts of this fan film that just don't do much right. And the way the characters talk, especially Superman, is very stoic. And yes, Superman is a sort of stoic character, but it shouldn't be to the point where you feel like you're not connecting to this person. It is doing the Henry Cavill, and Henry Cavill is one of the worst iterations of Superman ever. And not just to talk about acting now, let's go into story. The story of this fan film is kind of what Lotus does wrong. It tries to be a character study while talking about a depression and stuff, and doing the flashbacks around and stuff. And it doesn't work very well. This fan film feels a lot like Panopticon as well, which is the fan film I reviewed in 2022, which was like trying to get someone to not commit suicide while telling these stories of how inspiring they are. But that shouldn't make the person who wants to die any happier or sadder about the situation. It's just kind of Clark bragging about how cool he is. First he has this scene with the reporter, and it's like, that's not very inspiring. There's a scene with him with his father, which doesn't... It just feels like they're trying to throw in scenes. And it feels like a highlight reel almost. Like they're trying to show a ton of different things with Superman. And it's kind of him talking to the guy who wants to die. And the guy who wants to die is just saying stuff. And then Superman's like, let me tell you a story. And it's just these highlights of Superman's life. So yes, as a Superman fan, that would be very cool. But thinking plot-wise, why would the person who wants to die care what a guy who can't really die, what they can do? Like, sure, maybe Superman's hated a little. Sure, he got in a huge fight. But that's not an inspiring story. That's kind of just like, let's throw fan service in. And this fan film feels like a very large post-credit scene. Because at the 8-minute mark, we meet the suicidal character. Which wouldn't be bad if we weren't talking to this character for like 12 minutes. And in those 12 minutes, we didn't even get much. We don't know much about the character. We know a little. But it feels like during most of that time, they were like, okay, let's get like, in the writing room, they were probably like, okay, let's get this character right. And let's just have 12 minutes of the film just be them talking. And then having flashbacks thrown in. Because we want to show this scene from Superman and this scene from Superman. But it would have worked so much better if they said, let's make a 40-minute fan film with $21,000. And I'm assuming most of that money went to the VFX scene. But even if it didn't, what if they said, let's spend a little more money, let's spend maybe some of our own money to make this like 40 minutes, and let's make like a short Superman film. Let's do a scene, let's have it open with Superman, like a flashback maybe throughout with the scene with the father if they really want that. But maybe it could be like a pilot, like Brainiac's attacking someone, and then you have this scene with Superman talking to his dad, and then Superman reveals himself and starts saving people, and everyone's looking up to Superman, and then he fights Brainiac at the end, and it's a huge fight scene. And then maybe somewhere throughout you could be like having him save the kid who's suicidal, and it's like a 3 or 4 minute sequence, instead of a 12-minute sequence out of a 25-minute fan film. It just feels like, and even at the end when they set up the post-credit scene, well, during the post-credit scene, it's not even a setup, but they're setting up the Lex Luthor thing. It doesn't make much sense, because, yeah, sure, it's cool, but there's not really a point for it, and it feels very out of place, because Superman didn't have conflict in this film. It was the guy who wanted to die who had conflict. Superman had no conflict. He was happy letting that guy die. So, there was no conflict for what Superman would do. So, that was probably my biggest gripe story-wise. Choreography was just VFX, and the music was actually, I'll say the music was fine. But now let's get back to the story. Once Superman Solar dropped, people immediately started ripping into this fan film. I wouldn't even say immediately. I think it took a little bit, and I think it also took Spider-Man Lotus to release. And this is because when Spider-Man Lotus released, people reviewed Spider-Man Lotus to crazy. And then everyone was like, if you hated Spider-Man Lotus, watch Superman Solar, you'll hate it too. Or people who watched Superman Solar would be like, oh, get ready for Spider-Man Lotus. So they watch that as well. And it brought a ton of people into the fan film community. This and Spider-Man Lotus are two reasons the fan film community grew so much over the summer. But not for a very good reason. The studios that reviewed this fan film said how terrible it was and how many issues it had. And honestly, you can't blame them. This fan film does very little right, and people were very much ripping into it. To be fair, most people who made videos on how bad this was are people who haven't seen many fan films. So who knows, maybe they were just saying it from a film perspective, and if they saw other fan films, then maybe not. But as someone who has seen so many fan films, I can say for certain this fan film is just very bad. Not to finish talking about what is bad about the fan film, let's move on to the final thing. Politics. For some odd reason, they decided, let's throw politics in this fan film. That will go just great. And they're right, it made so many people hate the fan film even more. The amount of politics and ideas thrown into this fan film is honestly crazy. Some of the scenes with the news reporters and how they're saying certain things about Superman feels very political, and especially with some of the things about the suicidal guy. And some of the things Superman says to him, like, I'll let you die. That is a very political statement. That is not something anyone would say, and most people from a very specific political belief would only say that. And there are plenty of times throughout this film that people make very weird decisions, and not just do they make very weird decisions, because that's putting it lightly. They don't even make weird, odd decisions. They kind of just make bad decisions. And most of them are because they are trying to put politics in a fan film. They're like, let's do Superman, let's do highlights from Superman, and let's throw some politics because we want people to become whatever political party they belong to. And it just makes the fan film so much worse, and this is what destroyed it. If this fan film was just bad, it would have fell, yes, and people would hate it because of the fact that it was a $21,000 budget and it still sucked. So it would still be hated, but it is hated so much more because A, it does so many things wrong filmmaking-wise, and B, it is so politically driven. Like, people would hate Spider-Man Lotus, sure, they can hate it, but people would hate it so much more, or hate it so much less, if the racism didn't ever happen. If Gavin wasn't racist, and if Warden Wayne wasn't racist, and none of that controversy ever happened, people would still be like, Spider-Man Lotus sucked so bad. But people wouldn't hate it nearly as much, and it's the same with Superman Solar. And it is odd that two fan films that are very controversial released within a month of each other, but it also brought so many people to see the good fan films out there. But it also was like, are all fan films this bad? And no, they're not. It's just that these two fan films in specific didn't know what to do right and didn't know how to do things right. And specifically with Superman Solar, you cannot put politics in a fan film and expect it to go well. And as much as I wish I could talk about this fan film more, and as much as I wish I could say more about it, at the end of the day, you can't say much else besides the fact that this fan film is just really bad. And if you wish you could say more, I don't think there really is. This fan film, unlike Spider-Man Lotus, does not have much of a story. The story of this fan film is very simply the fact that it is about politics, and it is very bad. It does not have a long, convoluted story. The story of this fan film, very simply, is the fact that it does nothing right. And besides that, there's nothing else to be said. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.